Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Francisca, and in today's video we are going to be making this very pretty A-line shift dress. You can see that it has 3 panels, and we're going to be creating this without needing a pattern. So you need to watch this and see how I was able to achieve this dress without a pattern. I didn't have enough fabric to make a whole A-line shift dress, and since I had some scrap fabrics here and there, I decided to just combine them together, and this is the result. It's very pretty, right? So if you're new to my channel, welcome. Please click the subscribe button, click the bell so you get updated when I post new videos. And please, I have another channel. It's a natural hair channel called Siska Chidobe. I'm going to put the name on the screen so you guys can see. I'll leave a link in my description box so you can subscribe. You'll also see an eye that will pop up above this video, so you can go ahead and support me by subscribing. Thank you very much. I'm going to really appreciate that. And then now we can begin our sewing tutorial. These are the 3 colors of fabric that I'll be using to make this color blocked shift dress. So what I'm going to do is to go on to determine which one will be the first, the second, and the third, right? So I'll be going with white, yellow, black in that order. So top, middle, bottom. Okay, so guys, the length of this dress is 40 inches. So what I'll be doing is going with 13 inches for the first part, 13 inches for the second part, which will make a total of 26 inches. So 40 minus 26 is what? 14 inches. So the last part, which is this black, the length will be 14 inches. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with this piece here, which is our top piece, and then I'll be working with the back. I'll be starting from the back. So guys, I've marked my top line here, and this is what I have. What I'm going to do is to mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2. So my shoulder divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'll mark 7.5 right here. So can you see what I'm doing? I'll come right down again, mark 7.5. Okay, so my fabric is on fold. Can you see? And right at this folded edge is going to be my center back. Remember, I said I'm starting from the back. So what I'm going to do now is to join this to have a straight line. The next thing I'm going to do now is to go on to mark my armhole round divided by 2. And for me, that is 9 inches. So from the folded edge now, I'll mark 9 inches. Okay, I'm going to be adding half an inch for seam allowance at the top. So that will make it 9.5. And then I'll come right here as well, mark 9.5. And then I'm going to draw a straight line. On this straight line now, what I'm going to do is to input my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going with 37 inches. 37 divided by 4, that is 9.25. So I'll just come right here and mark 9.25. okay, and then I'm going to be marking an extra ½ inch for ease, since we are making a shift dress, and then I'll be adding ½ inch or 1 inch for seam allowance. It depends on you. So I'll just come right here and mark 1 inch for my seam allowance. Remember that I added ½ inch to this length because we want to ensure that we have seam allowance at the top to join the shoulder. Okay, so I'm just going to mark that ½ inch. Do you understand? Then I'll come right here, mark 1 inch for my shoulder slants. So I'll just mark the ½ inch at the top here for the seam allowance at the shoulder. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a straight line. So we need to differentiate our seam allowance from the rest of our measurements. So now that I've marked my seam allowance at the top, I've marked my 1 inch for my shoulder slant. I'll come right here and mark the width of my neckline. I'll be going with 4 inches for my neck width. Okay, so I'll come right here and mark 4 inches. That is my neck width. And then I'll join from my shoulder slant, 1 inch shoulder slant, to this neck width here to get our shoulder slope. My neck width for the back is going to be 2 inches. So I'll mark that 2 inches. Remember, I said we are doing the back first. And then from this neck width now, I'll connect it to the neck depth with a curve, and that will create our neckline. Okay, so this is what I have for my neckline at the back. Then I'll come right at my armhole line now. The remaining part, after marking my 1 inch for shoulder slope, I'll go ahead and measure that. I should be having 8 inches. So I'm going to divide that into 2, which is 4. What I'll do is to connect from my bust now, where I've marked my allowances, connect it all the way to this point with a curve as well. If you have an armhole curve or a French curve, please go ahead and use that to curve out your back armhole. Do you understand that? So what I'm going to do now is to go on to add my seam allowance at the armhole. Then I'll come right here now, mark 1/2 inch seam allowance for my shoulder slope. Do you understand? Then add 1/2 inch for seam allowance for my neckline. Okay, so once I'm done with this marking, from shoulder to my bust line, what I'm going to do now is to mark that 13 inches that I said I was going to mark for the length of this first part. And then I'll be starting my markings, my measurements from this part here, not from the seam allowance at the top. Do you understand? I said I'll be going with 13 inches, right? So I have 13 inches here, and then I need to have 1/2 inch for seam allowance, which is exactly what I have right here. So once I make sure that I have that 13.5 inches, what I'm going to do now is get my second fabric, and I'm going to be pinning this on top of the second fabric by that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we want to get this as accurately as possible. You can either place this on top of this or this on top of this. So let's go with this instead. So make sure it is over it by 1/2 inch, because that's what you're going to use to join the pieces together. And please, you have to make sure that this folded edge of your fabric is a straight line. If it's sort of bent, it's going to affect how it will look. Okay, so make sure you have a ruler to help ensure that you do have a straight line at this point, or a straight folded edge at this point. So I'll just clip this part down. So once I'm satisfied with what I have, the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark the next 13 inches, and I'll be starting from the edge of this fabric here because we have overlapped by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to come right here now. I'll be marking 13 inches, and guys, my own fabric is up to 13.5. So can you see I need 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom here as well? So I'll make sure that I have that 13.5 inches as well on this side. So once I'm satisfied with that, what I'm going to do now is to go on to draw a slanted line from this part, extend it to this fabric here. I'll just place my ruler like this. We're making an A-line shift dress. So I'll place my ruler like this, and then I'll just slant it. Make sure that you measure the width of this part, because what I have at this length here will be like around 26, and that is where my hip is, and I need this to be free around my hip. So I need to make sure that what I have at this point here is the circumference of my hip divided by 4 plus allowances for the free shift dress. Okay, so the circumference of my hip is 41 divided by 4 is 10.25. so by the time I check this, I have like an extra 3 inches inclusive of seam allowance, 1 inch seam allowance for joining at the side seam area. Okay, so I'll just connect from where I placed my ruler, connect it to my bust line with a slant. So guys, once I'm done with this part, I'm going to get the last piece now, which is this black piece, and what I'm going to do is place this one right on top of it by 1/2 inch, just like we did for this part here. Okay, so I'll just place it right on top. So I've clipped it right here. This is what I have. So once we have established that straight line at the folded edge, I'm going to come to where we are marking our slants now. So from here, this part right here, I'll be marking my 14 inches, and then I'll be adding 1 inch for hemming allowance at the bottom of my dress. So that will be making this 15 inches. Okay, so I'll just come right here, mark 15 inches. I'll come at another point, mark 15 inches, so we can have a straight line. Very, very important. And then I'll just join it together. So guys, once I've established my straight line at the bottom, what I'm going to do now, from the slant line that we have at this second fabric, I'm just going to be connecting it straight all the way down like this. Do you understand? So we're going to have like a perfect A-line dress. Okay, and we have our A-line dress. The next thing I'm going to do is to come up at the side, come up by 2 inches like this. So can you see what I did there? And then what I'm going to do now is to just curve it. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and cut this out following the markings that I have made. After cutting out the back piece, this is what I have. So I've gone ahead to also duplicate that back piece to have two back patterns. Now I will be converting one of these back patterns to the front, okay? And what I just need is just the top part. So I've put the top part here, and I'll be making use of the one that I marked, okay? So that it's going to be easier for us and faster for us, so I don't have to start explaining all these lines. So what I'm going to do now is to do some changes to the armhole as well as the neckline. For front dresses or front bodies, you'll notice that the armhole goes inside a bit, right? And I already have the midpoint of this my armhole line marked. Remember that I have seam allowance of 1/2 inch here. What I'm going to do is to come in here by 1/2 inch. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now create a curve from this part here that we marked, connect it to the 1/2 inch, connect the 1/2 inch to this point here, okay? Now this is not what we are going to cut. You still need to add your 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So I'm just going to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance at this point here and then cut it out. So now we have our armhole curve for the front. The next thing I'm going to do is to adjust my neckline, and I want the neckline to be deeper than what I have here, okay? So I'll just bring it down by an extra 4 inches. So from here now, I'll mark 4 inches. I think I'm just going to make that 5. So I mark 5 inches here, and then I'll just create a curve from this point. Create whatever neckline that you want. If you want a circular neckline, if you want a V neckline, just go ahead and create that for yours. So once I'm done marking, all I just need to do is to go ahead and cut this out, and then we have our neckline for the front. So guys, this is what I have for my front neckline. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the pieces together. So I'm going to make sure to place the fabric on top of each other, right side to right side stitching, and I'll be sewing by 1/2 inch. So I'll join the first panel to the second panel by 1/2 inch, right side to right side stitching. I'll join the second panel to the third panel by 1/2 inch seam allowance, right side to right side stitching as well. So this is the front piece. This is what I have. I'll repeat the same thing that I just explained for the back piece. So I'll just go ahead and sew my pieces together. So guys, after sewing the pieces together, this is what I have. I've sewn each of the panels to their corresponding panels, if you get what I mean. I've done it for both the front and the back, okay? So I went ahead to overlock the raw edges so that it is, nice and neat and the raw edges doesn't fray. That is why I did that. I used a zigzag stitch for this. And you can see that this seam allowance is pressed downward. So you want to do that, just follow the law of gravity, let everything fall down, okay? Flip it downward, press it really well, very, very neat. So you can see how mine looks. I went ahead to, join the shoulder seams by a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that and make sure to, overlock the raw edges. The next thing I'm going to do is to go on to conceal the raw edge of my neckline and the armhole area. So I'm going to be using a bias tape for that. I don't want to do a rolled hem for this tutorial. I'll just use my bias tape, conceal the raw edges. It's going to keep it very, very neat. So guys, after sewing my bias tape onto my neckline, this is what I have. This is what it looks like. I've also gone ahead to sew it at the armhole area like I said, and I've pressed it down so lays nice and flat, okay? I went ahead to use a bias tape as well at the bottom of the dress, and this is what we have. It made it nice and neat for me. I like to use bias tape a lot, okay? So guys, the next thing I'm going to do now is to go on to sew the side seam of this blouse. And before I go ahead and sew, I need to make sure that the seams match, okay? So just go on to pin this down before you go ahead and sew, okay? And I'm going to be sewing by a 1 inch seam allowance. And at the point where I have my different colors, I'll be using different color of thread. So this does not, look somehow on the inside, even though it's the wrong side. I want it to, be that neat. You can go on to use one particular color of thread to, sew and overlock. That is definitely up to you, but I will just be using my white here, yellow here, and black at the bottom, okay? So guys, I'll just take this to my sewing machine now and then sew the side seam for both sides. So guys, after sewing by my 1 inch seam allowance, I cut 1/2 inch off, And I went ahead to overlock the raw edges as I explained earlier. Okay, I used different colors of thread to sew and overlock these parts. You can see that I don't have white here, I don't have black here. I hope you can see that I don't have another color here. So after sewing and doing that, this is what it looks like. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, turn on the bell so you get updates when I post new videos, and I'm going to be seeing you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.